Elements in the periodic table, nonmetals and metalloids. In this lesson we're going to talk about nonmetals and metalloids. We'll look at the physical properties of nonmetals and the chemical properties of nonmetals. We'll also talk about the families that contain all of the nonmetals, the carbon family, the nitrogen family, the oxygen family, the halogen family, the noble gases, hydrogen, and then specifically we'll go into talking about the metalloids. So what are the properties of nonmetals? Life on Earth depends on many nonmetals. Carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus are all nonmetal elements found in your body. In the past, we've heard them called CHNOPs, C-H-N-O-P-S, the vital elements that make up all living things. While many compounds made with nonmetals are essential to life, some nonmetals are poisonous and highly reactive, especially in high concentrations. Still, other nonmetals are non-reactive. Compared to metals, nonmetals have a much wider variety of properties. Specifically, the properties are going to be dependent upon the group that those elements are found in. Each group will have its own properties. However, many nonmetals do have several properties in common. Physical properties. A nonmetal is an element that lacks most of the properties of metals. That's pretty intuitive. If you are a nonmetal, you are not going to have the properties of a metal. Except for hydrogen, the nonmetals are found on the right side of the periodic table. In general, most nonmetals are poor conductors of electrical current, along with heat. Solid nonmetals tend to be dull and brittle. So this picture right here shows coal. Coal is made mostly of carbon. Coal is a nonmetal that is brittle and dull. If you were to hit most solid nonmetals with a hammer, they would break or crumble into a powder. Coal, again, is a perfect example. If you were to take a piece of charcoal and hit it with a hammer, it would turn into a very fine, dark powder. Also, nonmetals usually have lower densities than metals. Many nonmetals are gases at room temperature. The air that we breathe consists mostly of nitrogen and oxygen. Some nonmetal elements, such as carbon, sulfur, and iodine, are solids at room temperature. So the picture here shows sulfur and iodine, sulfur on the left, iodine on the right. Sulfur is used in gunpowders, in fireworks, and iodine is used to kill microscopic organisms. So iodine is added to salt, iodized salt. It helps to supply individuals with the needed iodine that they need for their diet. And it's also used to clean skin prior to giving a shot. A lot of times the swabs that a doctor wipes on your arm or a nurse wipes on your arm contain amounts of iodine in them. Bromine is the only nonmetal that is a liquid at room temperature. And this picture shows liquid bromine at room temperature. Chemical properties. Atoms of nonmetals usually gain or share electrons when they react with other atoms. When nonmetals and metals react, electrons move from the nonmetal atoms to the metal atoms. In this picture, you can see the example where sodium and chlorine react to form table salt, or NaCl. The sodium, which is found in group number 1, has one extra electron. The chlorine, which is found in group 17, is one electron short of a full outer shell. So the sodium wants to give up an electron because it has one extra, and the chlorine wants to gain an electron because it's one short. When sodium and chlorine share an atom, or share an electron, it creates NaCl, table salt. Many nonmetals can form compounds with other nonmetals. In these types of compounds, the atoms share their electrons to form bonds. So for example, when two or more atoms bond together, they form a molecule. Water is an example of a molecule where one oxygen atom is bonded together with two hydrogen atoms. The carbon family. Inside of your notes, you should see this picture of the periodic table under each section. What I want you to do inside of your notes is I want you to take and highlight or color in the elements that make up each of the families, and then identify the family by labeling it. So in group 14, only carbon is a nonmetal. So anytime you see the red symbol pop up over top of a box, that's the one you're going to highlight in and identify this one as the carbon family. So carbon is the only one that makes up the carbon family. Carbon is especially important in its role in the chemistry of living things. Proteins, DNA, and fats all contain carbon. Your body is made up of carbon. All living things are made up of carbon. Plants, animals, humans. We are all carbon-based life forms. Most of the fuels that are burned to yield energy contain carbon. Our internal combustion engines that we have in our automobiles burn carbon compounds to produce energy. That energy is then used to get your vehicle to move. Coal contains large amounts of carbon. So we mine coal, and then we send coal to areas that generate electricity. Specifically, coal-fired power plants burn that coal to produce electricity. Gasoline is made from crude oil, which is a mixture of carbon compounds with one carbon atom up to very long chains of carbon atoms. So this picture right here shows a number of hydrocarbons. Plastic is a hydrocarbon with very long chains of carbon and hydrogen attached to it. Motor oil is a little bit shorter than plastics, but it's still chains of carbon atoms. Diesel is a little bit shorter of a chain of carbon atoms and hydrogen atoms. And gasoline is a little bit shorter of a chain versus diesel. Diamonds are made up of pure carbon. So if we add enough heat and pressure to carbon, eventually we can cause it to form into pure carbon, and it gets a very crystalline structure, and it also gives us that nice clear look that we see in a diamond. The nitrogen family. Group 15. It consists of two nonmetals, nitrogen and phosphorus. So again, color in those two and identify them as the nitrogen family. Nitrogen makes up about 78% of Earth's atmosphere. In nature, nitrogen exists as two nitrogen atoms bonded together to form a diatomic molecule. A diatomic molecule is made up of two atoms. As a diatomic molecule, nitrogen is not very reactive. And this is a good thing for us because the vast majority of the breaths that we take bring in nitrogen. If nitrogen was reactive, it would cause a problem in our respiratory system. As it is, nitrogen is not reactive, therefore we don't have problems with breathing in nitrogen. So although living things can't get nitrogen through breathing it in, we do still need nitrogen. And so we have to find another way to get nitrogen into our body to create the muscles and the tissues that we have. And we have to do that without the process of just breathing it in and using it. So we can't breathe in nitrogen and use it. However, there are certain bacteria that can take atmospheric nitrogen, so the gas form of nitrogen, and convert it into compounds that are usable. This process is called nitrogen fixation. The bacteria transform atmospheric nitrogen into nitrogen that is usable by you and me, and also by plants and animals. Plants can take in these nitrogen compounds formed by the bacteria in the soil. Looking at this picture, we see a bunch of nodules. The nodules are homes in the roots of this plant that are used by bacteria. The bacteria in the nodules convert atmospheric nitrogen into compounds that are usable by the plant, and then the plant absorbs those nutrients and uses it inside their stem and leaves. Animals come along and they eat the plant and consume the nitrogen. Or maybe we eat a salad and we consume the nitrogen that is inside of the leafy greens that we have in our salad. Farmers also add nitrogen compounds to the soil in the form of fertilizers. Lightning can convert nitrogen in the atmosphere into a form that's usable by plants as well. Phosphorus is the other nonmetal in the nitrogen family. Phosphorus has its own cycle much the way that nitrogen does. Phosphorus, however, is much more reactive than nitrogen. Phosphorus is always found in compounds in nature, so it has to bind with other elements in nature because of how reactive it is. The oxygen family. Group 16, which is the oxygen family, contains 3 nonmetals: oxygen, sulfur, and selenium. So again, color in these boxes on the periodic table and identify them or label them as the oxygen family. Oxygen is a gas at room temperature, whereas sulfur and selenium are both solids. With every breath that you take, oxygen travels into your lungs. There, the oxygen is absorbed into your bloodstream, and it's distributed all over your body. Like nitrogen, oxygen, which is O2, is a diatomic molecule. The oxygen that you breathe in and use in your body is O2. 2 oxygen atoms attached to each other. Oxygen is relatively reactive, so it can combine with almost every other element. If you've ever smelled the odor of rotten eggs, you've already become familiar with the smell of sulfur compounds. Sometimes water contains sulfur compounds that cause it to have that rotten egg smell. Other things that contain sulfur are fireworks and gunpowder. Sulfur is used in the manufacturing of rubber for rubber bands and also for automobile tires. The halogen family. Group 17 contains the nonmetals fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and iodine. These are the halogens. And again, label them inside of your note sheet. Halogen means salt forming. Many of these elements like to bind with group number 1. When these elements combine with group number 1, they form salts. NaCl, sodium chloride, is a perfect example of that, and it's simply table salt. The properties of astatine are unknown because it's extremely rare, so we haven't had an opportunity to study it very well. In the future, it may become one of the halogen family. All of the halogens are very reactive. The reason that this group is very reactive is because they are 1 electron short in their outer shell of having a full electron shell. So they want to steal an electron from any element that they can. This causes them to be very highly reactive. Fluorine is the most reactive of all the elements. It's so reactive that it reacts with almost every known substance. It even reacts with water. Chlorine gas is extremely dangerous, but if we use it in very small amounts and dilute it right down, it will help to kill bacteria in water supplies. Though the halogen elements are dangerous, many of them form compounds that are very useful to us. So when we talk about the halogens and we talk about them being very dangerous because they want to steal electrons from other things, other elements, we also need to consider that when they do bind with other elements, they are very useful. Compounds of fluorine make up non-stick coatings that are on top of cookware. Fluorine compounds are found in toothpaste because it helps to prevent tooth decay. Used to be that fluorine was also added to water supplies, drinking water supplies. More and more we've gotten rid of fluorine inside of drinking water supplies because we've found that it is very reactive and it can cause adverse health problems when drank. Hydrogen. Hydrogen is alone in the upper left-hand corner of the periodic table. So it's by itself up there. It has the least complex atomic structure, has one proton and one electron. Hydrogen's chemical properties are very different than all of the other elements, therefore we don't group it with any other family. It makes up more than 90% of the atoms in the universe. Most of those atoms are found in stars, like our sun. They contain massive amounts of hydrogen. Hydrogen only makes up about 1% of the mass of our planet. That 1% is found in water, where hydrogen binds with oxygen, forming H2O. The noble gases, group number 18. Every element in group number 18 is a noble gas. Noble gases do not ordinarily form compounds because the atoms of noble gases have full outer energy levels with regards to their electrons. So they don't like to gain, lose, or even share electrons. They're happy just the way they are. As a result, the noble gases are usually non-reactive. Even so, scientists have been able to synthesize some noble gas compounds in the lab. Helium is used in balloons, and because it's less dense than air, balloons float. Noble gases are also used in glowing electric lights called neon signs. The noble gases are added to a tube of glass. They are trapped inside the glass. An electrical current is added to the noble gas, and they give that neat neon glow. So a little bit of review. What are the families containing the nonmetals? Remember, the families containing the nonmetals are the carbon family, the nitrogen family, the oxygen family, the halogen family, the noble gases, and hydrogen. So inside of each of those families, what elements are present? The carbon family. The carbon family contains carbon. The nitrogen family contains nitrogen, along with phosphorus. The oxygen family contains oxygen, sulfur, and selenium. The halogen family. Don't be mistaken here, halogen is not an element. The halogen family consists of fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine. In the noble gases, we have helium, neon, argon, krypton, xenon, and radon. And then finally, the hydrogen family only consists of hydrogen. The metalloids. Between the metals and the nonmetals in the periodic table lie the metalloids. And again, identify where the metalloids are located by shading in each element that is a metalloid. The metalloids have some properties of metals and some properties of nonmetals. All metalloids are solids at room temperature. The metalloids are brittle, hard, and somewhat reactive. The most common metalloid is silicon. Ordinary sand, which is mostly silicon dioxide, SiO2, is the main component of glass. A compound of boron and oxygen is added during the process of glass making to make heat-resistant glass. A metalloid's most useful property is its ability to conduct electrical current. The conductivity of a metalloid can depend on temperature, exposure to light, or the presence of impurities. For this reason, metalloids such as silicon and germanium are used to make semiconductors. Semiconductors are substances that can conduct electrical current under some conditions, but not under other conditions. Semiconductors are used to make computer chips, transistors, and lasers. Semiconductors are also used in solar cells that collect solar energy. The solar energy is then converted to electrical energy, and we use that electrical energy inside of our homes.